parable of the Good Samaritan is one of the most familiar of all the Gospels, and we have used the thing about the Good Samaritan. We have in the law about it in some places. So to take another look at it today, I'm just going to ask you, in this whole Gospel passage, with whom do you identify? And just as a hint, it might be more than one person, okay? The first person in there would be the lawyer who comes up to test Jesus. We might ask ourselves, have I ever been anybody who at any time ever tested God? Okay, God, if you're really God and you really care for me, then you'll find me a better paying job tomorrow. Or whatever the test may be. It's usually a little deeper and a little more serious than that. But sometimes we can test God in our minds, and even in our prayer. No judgments, I'm just saying we can do it. And the second thing is about the lawyer is that he already knows what he's supposed to do, but he wants to find out. He says, I just want to find out what I'm supposed to get to heaven. What am I supposed to do to get to heaven? Anybody in here ever want to get to heaven? That's kind of was his main thing. I just want to get to heaven. That's what I'm going for. And the last thing about the lawyer is that when Jesus says this thing about love your neighbor as yourself, the lawyer said all that, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. He says, well, who's my neighbor? Well, really what he was asking is, who isn't my neighbor? Who can I exclude so I don't have to care for that person? Have we ever done that ourselves? Excluded people. Well, I don't have to care about them. They don't fit in. Okay, then we get into the parable itself. And in the parable, we have a man who's in the ditch because he's been beaten up and he's left half dead. And we have a priest walking by. Maybe you can identify with the priest. Oh, not that, it's like, well, I'm not a priest. Well, let's see what he did. The priest had the obligation to go and serve at the temple. But the problem was that if he touched a dead man and it looked like he was maybe dead, well, then he was 7 days ritually impure. So he had responsibilities he had to carry out. And he had to be there in time for services. So he just don't have the time because of all the things we have to do to care for somebody else. So we could be like the priest sometimes, too. Or then there's the Levite. Now the Levite sees the priest walking up there. He sees him whoosh, take a little detour and go around. And so he walks up there and sees what the detour is about. And then he says, well, the priest didn't do anything about it, so why should I? So he goes by. It's like, it's not my problem. Somebody else has to deal with that. We ever done that? Well, nobody else is doing anything. I'm not going to do it either. Nobody washed the dishes. I'm not doing it either. And much more important things. And finally, the Samaritan comes by. With the Samaritan, he sees the need and he responds to it. So 3 out of 4 people, the lawyer plus the 3 guys in the parable, 3 out of 4 people had a tough time connecting their religious faith to their real life. And I suggest that sometimes we might have that too. I remember when I was a kid and we'd come here to church and we'd be driving home and my mom's driving the car or my mom and dad, or I don't know, and we start, well, not exactly fighting, but you know how kids are. My mother turned around and said, for goodness sake, you just got out of church. And we're going, so? What's that about? Or maybe we've just done something or said something, and someone turns to us and says, and you call yourself a Christian? After doing or saying what you just did or said? The connection between what we believe with our faith and how we act in our lives, sometimes hard to make. We don't do it. It just doesn't occur to us. I mean, I got to do something different now? Yeah, well, maybe. Maybe you do. So with the lawyer, he didn't make the connection. The Samaritan did, because it was likely that the Samaritan had been in the ditch himself. Maybe not beaten up and left half dead, but he's a Samaritan. Samaritans were hated. They were discriminated against. They were persecuted. So I suspect it was easy enough for him to look at those people who were passing by with the eyes of the half-dead man in the ditch. And knowing that he had been there himself, in one way or another, he was moved with compassion to reach out to this man, Samaritan though he was, and realize their common humanity, and to take care of him with his own money and in his own time. And Jesus wants us too to identify with the man in the ditch, not anybody else who's walking around. And I suspect a number of us have already been there, needing somebody else's help, physically, economically, relationally, spiritually. I just can't do it anymore. I really need somebody to be here with me, to help me in one way or another. And if we know that experience of being in the ditch, then Jesus wants us to know that that is what we are called to do as people who may not now be in the ditch, one who reaches out to one another. And for me, that just brings us back to the first reading from the book of Deuteronomy, where it says, "This command is not too mysterious for you. It is not up in the sky, so you have to say, well, who's going to go up to get it? Or it's not across the sea, say, well, who's going to go across the sea to get it for us? No. It is already in your mouths and in your heart. The common humanity that would cause us to reach out to one another, our common brothers and sisters, no matter who they are, with compassion, is already in our heart. And the lawyer knew that. What does the law say, Jesus says? Well, you're supposed to love God with your whole heart, mind, soul, and strength, and your neighbor as yourself. All right, then what does it look like? How do we make that application? Because it's supposed to make a difference when we walk out these doors. I'm going to close with a story that came from a man named Brennan Manning in a book called Stranger to Self-Hatred. I read it as a true story. Whether or not it is, I know not. It's about three businessmen who lived in Milwaukee, and this was some years ago, and they took a train one day down to Chicago for a meeting. It was supposed to be an all-day meeting, getting out late. Well, it got out early, and they could have caught the 4:30 back to Milwaukee. So let's go, and they ran down there, and were running through the station to catch the train, and while they did, one of them bumped a cart that a teenage boy and he was selling apples. He bumped the cart and they went flying all over, and they all three of them just got on the train anyway. And right before the train pulled out, one guy got off the train and says, I'll see you at home. He went back to the boy and said, we're sorry, we bumped your cart, and helped him pick up all the apples. And while he's doing that, he realized that the boy was blind and he couldn't have helped himself. So he feels really bad about it, but really glad he got back there and fixed it all up. And he knew some of the apples were kind of wasted and bumped and bruised and everything. So I gave him $40. Says, here, I want you to take this and, for your trouble and in case there are any bad apples here. So would you do that? And the boy says, yes. He says, thank you. And he says, well, again, I'm really sorry it happened, and I hope you're okay. So he started to walk away, and the little boy said, wait a minute. Are you Jesus?